This your boy James, and you are now in tune for the 79th Street Podcast. And when I mean 79, I just mean my thoughts and perspectives from growing up on the south side of Chicago. So let's get it. If you haven't heard about the Anchor app, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. The creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and computer. Anchor will then help you distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on avenues like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from these podcasts. So please go download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. On this episode of the podcast, we will be talking about mentorship and why it's important. So for a lot of people that know me, they know that mentorship is like my expertise. I've been involved with mentorship type programs since about 6th grade. The first unofficial mentor program that I was kind of pulled in, the computer teacher from one of the grammar schools I went to picked me out of all the kids in the school to participate and learn and golf from. Like, I kid you not. And as I transferred from that school, I met a man by the name of Marlon McLaughlin, who I would consider one of my lifelong mentors. And Mr. McLaughlin, from the moment I met him, he was just impressed with how I carried myself and how I interact with my brothers, where he wanted me around. And so from there, he put me on the school safety patrol. So I was doing that, and I was doing color guard for assembly. So I was carrying the flags for the assemblies at school. As this progressed, I learned a lot from Mr. McLaughlin. He would pull me into different projects, but it was a program that he was taking kind of some of the disciplinary students to, called the Concerned Christian Man program. And after a while, he was kind of like, hey, I need to be getting, some of the good students involved, because the program had some real life rewards where, students who participated had the opportunity, to go to basketball games, stuff. And this is saying a lot when you grew up in a poor neighborhood. And so he kind of switched some of the students he was taking and started taking kind of some of the, the good students. And this was kind of my first introduction to mentorship, because, I became a leader within the program because I started, just taking lead on stuff. And as I transitioned to high school, it was time where, since I still lived around the corner from my grammar school, I would still go to the, meet up with Mr. McLaughlin and the kids he had from my elementary school and go do the mentorship program. So mentorship in college, I think is important. I think that you need to find out, who's going to be right for you. And I've been in a number of different situations where I've had mentors assigned to me for various programs. So when I was in the S-Plan Surviving Seed program, I had a mentor that was given to me, but you also have mentors that, just find you from the work that you're doing around campus, both, professionals and your fellow peers. I think all type of mentorship is warranted and there's benefits of it, but mentorship is definitely something that you should all, get involved with. So when I first went to college, day one, I'm coming in, Miss Curry's putting me in S-Plan. So anybody that knows Miss Curry was our Surviving Seed coordinator. I walked in the Center for Black Studies looking for Mr. Smith because I was sent there by Dr. Wyatt. Dr. Wyatt is another lifelong mentor I met, in high school. So he sent me to the Center for Black Studies, said, hey, go meet Derek Smith, tell him I sent you. And I walked in, I met Miss Curry, and she instantly said, hey, are you in S-Plan? I'm like, nah, I don't think I'm in S-Plan. And she literally signed me up from S-Plan. And as I would come around, Miss Curry told me, like, hey, just come to the center. We got you. And I just started coming around the center. And from this, I picked up another mentor Farouk, who he worked at the Center for Black Studies, so he became a mentor throughout college. And as I progress along, I become a mentor to to other students indefinitely. Where these students are seeking me out for advice. I'm getting mentees through S Plan, who are checking in, and then you develop relationships outside of these organizations where people see you, they see where you are, and they say like, "Hey, I want this person to be my mentor." And I think the mentor-mentee relationship is very important. So some things I recommend and I suggest for people is to one, establish the guidelines and boundaries. So I was always one of those people. So shout out to Farouk because I was always one of those people who, I kind of treated them probably a little bit more professionally than most. Party, drink, or smoke, whatever people were doing with a mentee. That wasn't my thing. I just wanted to focus on the academics, goal set the goals, and how can we reach those goals. That was kind of my approach, and it definitely worked for me in the long run. Versus some other people where you can clearly see some people didn't need to be mentors, and that really grind my gears because some people just did it. And when I was in a position of running S Plan, I'm not gonna lie, it was a lot of people who we didn't allow to be mentors, and that was just because of the fact it was like, hey, this person wasn't reliable. We didn't want these people around the first years because that's a very delicate time, and they just needed to be with the right people. And so we really vamped up the mentoring. We was doing mentor trainings on like do's and don'ts of mentoring. And these were some things where I don't know if it happened when I was a first year because I clearly wasn't around. But these are things that I implemented because I was just so passionate about mentorship. Even in high school, there was mentorship involved. In college, there was mentorship involved. So I was always a mentor. And it was just became a part of my identity. In grad school, almost every paper I wrote, I included mentorship in it somehow. And some people say like, "Oh, hey, well, that's cliche," but it just became a niche, and you became an expert because you're running these programs, you're participating in them, you just want the best for those involved. A mentor, if you don't know, is pretty much an individual who advises or trains someone that's a younger colleague, a younger generation, somebody who's more experienced, a counselor, a mentor. They provide feedback and they hold you accountable, in my beliefs. And then you have the mentee. The mentee is the one who is learning the information, taking it in, and hopefully one day that mentee becomes the mentor and kind of does some of those same things. So if anybody is a visual learner like myself, and if you've seen Harry Potter, just think about the relationship between Harry and Dumbledore. Dumbledore was very much a mentor to Harry and teaching him everything because he knew what awaited Harry in the long run. So Dumbledore acted as that mentor to train and teach him things so that he could be prepared for the danger that lie ahead. There are many different types of mentoring. We all know one-on-one mentoring, peer-to-peer mentoring. So peer-to-peer, so peers. It could be somebody that's a year older than you. Y'all could be mentoring each other. I've been in peer-to-peer mentoring programs in high school and in college. You have online mentoring, and that's just to connect people from across the country. You have group mentoring, specific group mentoring where it's kind of more personalized on whether it's, race, on various interests and things of that sort. So, benefits of mentoring for the mentee: you have some skill development, you have knowledge sharing, you have encouraging personal growth. It helps engage with alumni. It enriches the college experience. It increases retention rates. and it enhances confidence and offers challenges to set higher goals and take risks. For a mentor, some of the benefits is you get to support the next generation, you can contribute to your own personal growth. It helps expose you to the emerging talent pool, so you get first dibs on those talent, those up and coming workers. Distinct yourself from someone who is serving as a role model for others. It helps you enhance your coaching, leadership, and managing skills. It gives you a lasting network, and it allows you to provide intrinsic satisfaction by helping an emerging professional to develop his or her potential. So some people may say like, hey, what skills do one as a mentor need? I think it's important to kind of say like, hey, as a mentor, you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to listen. You need to be able to be approachable. You need to be honest, compassionate, prepared, and you need to be good at goal setting and managing those expectations with the mentee, because the mentee is looking at you as an expert. They're going to follow your lead. And so if you send them off or give them bad advice, you got to own up to that and just be able to say like, hey, this is where I went wrong. This is where I dropped the ball, and be able to own up to that. I was fortunate enough to, be surrounded by many mentors, many different scenarios. You find out things that work and don't work. Where as much as I love mentoring, and it's been a part of my identity for years, there have been instances where I have mentees that don't want to be around, and you can reach out as much as possible. They just not rocking with you, and that's going to happen, especially when you have some of these mentorings given to you from various organizations. The more fluent relationships that I found are the ones where somebody reach out to you, say like, hey James, I want you to be my mentor. Those things have worked out extremely well for me. Versus like some of the ones that were assigned to me, I've had people, fall off the map when you don't hear from them. And, I always tell people this, as a mentor, sometimes you have to make the right decision. Some mentees are not going to live up to your expectations, and not saying that's a bad thing. One day you might have to make that decision to cut a mentee off. What they doing, and it's worked both ways, because as a mentee, you might have to cut a mentor off. Say like, hey, you're not lining up to what I'm doing. This is not going to work out, and it's going to happen. But I'm in a situation, where I definitely had to let a mentee go, and it was just because of the, had a bad semester, which nothing wrong with that. I had bad semesters in college, but it's kind of like all of the line, what was going on, not going to class, and I knew his teacher, so I knew what was going on. It's just like, I'm like, man, either you gonna tell me the truth, or we ain't gonna be able to do this anymore, and kind of, he just kept the same approach. Whereas, I was in class, I did this assignment, and it kind of wasn't working out, and the student, I don't know if I did it, but I had a tough conversation with him, like, hey, either this gonna happen, or we just gonna have to, rock with each other from a distance. And, I think this particular person just move forward on their own. Sometimes those tough decisions are gonna happen, and I would tell people don't take it personal, because I took it personal. I ain't gonna lie, I took it personal. And, I had to talk to, some of my mentors and, my roommates at the time, and they was like, James, they was like, man, you was doing a lot, for this kid, like you was feeding them at times, giving them a place to sleep because roommate conflict and stuff, and I did the best I could, but he wasn't willing to learn or listen, and I think that's just important for people, to listen to and take. Today on the 79th Street Podcast, we got my sis Jasmine and bro Reggie, and we're gonna be talking about mentoring today. First question is, when did you learn about mentoring?
I learned about mentoring my freshman year of college at Northern Illinois University. I started in a group called S Plans for Success and Succeed Plan, and there I actually gained my first mentor, as far as more of a formal mentee mentor situation anyway. Yeah, otherwise I have a few mentors from church that started as I was a very young youth. I don't remember the age, but yeah, that would be the first time I would say.
As far as me, it probably I first probably learned about mentoring when I like originally crossed back in 2009, but it probably was more so like me starting out when I was trying to start to develop actually in my career at work. Was when the actual word mentor mentee was definitely starting to be thrown out there to me.
Believe it or not, I've been involved with mentoring since I was in seventh grade. Although I didn't know what it was, I think I found out what mentoring was when I went to high school and I joined the Kenwood Academy Brotherhood, and it was just like being thrown at me like, "Hey, this is what a mentor is. This is a mentoring program," and so I just kind of been running with it from then. And so I know both of y'all kind of talked about it. Um, what pushed you? So you mentioned your involvement and after you crossing, and then Jasmine mentioned her joining S Plan. So what made you, I guess, join those organizations? That's a fair question. Was it the mentorship? Was it something else? But what made you get involved with those organizations?
I was a black kid lost at college, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, like, I mean, like for a lot of, I mean, especially going into like a predominantly white school or white institution, or just like pretty much probably going to any school that you're not necessarily familiar with who the like, it's always about trying to find somebody like who can help guide you along the way. So I mean, like I know for me, like honestly, like the organization that I joined, I never would have thought that I would have joined being Iota Phi Theta. I mean, growing up, I always wanted to be an alpha. Like, I mean, that's all my family was. Like, that's all I knew about. But it was like something about, the Iotas, like, when, at least for me, like, they took me under their wing. Like, I mean, and then being in BMI, Black Male Initiative at the school, definitely helped out too. So a lot of them actually was on the e-boards of BMI, like reaching out, like seeing how I was doing, seeing how I was doing in class, like, inviting me to different events on campus. I had a friend who ended up pledging, and he even started taking me under his wing, like, when they would do road trips, like, was like, hey, you should come out with us.
Right.
So, and then it's like you said earlier, like, I mean, I think like mentoring has always been something a part of our lives. We never
you just don't know what it was.
Yeah, you don't necessarily never call it that. Like I mean, like I've seen like a lot of people be like, oh, that's like my little bro, that's my little sis, like it's like the little nephew, or whatever.
Yeah, I agree. So to that point, like I didn't realize, and it's funny when you think about it. So, Mr. McLaughlin was our seventh grade computer teacher. So I give him credit with being my first mentor because he took me under his wing. And like when I tell you, Mr. McLaughlin been cold, like. He'd have been to like 3 of my graduations. Like I'm talking about 8th grade, high school, and when I got my master's degree. And that just to show you like the bond. But I couldn't conceptualize what it was until I was in college. I was with some people from BMI, from Black Male Initiative, where we was talking about mentoring, and I'm like, dang, Mr. McLaughlin was a whole mentor, like, and it just like I'm like, oh dang, it was like I'm like mind blown, like, but for me. I think Jasmine spoke to it, Reggie spoke to it. When I came to college, I jumped into a lot of stuff at once. It's Black Male Initiative, I had a connection. One of my bros from high school, Cal McGee, he had came to NIU and graduated. He kind of was pushing Black Male Initiative to me over the summer. And so when I came to college, like, I'm going to be in Black Male Initiative. And I had already connected with some people. Like, I'm talking about, it was like the first 2 weeks of school, and I'm at the table, like, recruiting people. Like, that's how I was in that. But also, I was in S Plan. Because I went to the Center for Black Studies looking for Mr. Smith because he knew my high school counselor. And Dr. Wyatt said, go see Mr. Smith. And Miss Curry seen me and was like, hey, who are you? What you doing here? And she was like, are you in S Plan? I'm like, no. And she's like, all right, I'm going to put you in S Plan. And that's how I ended up. I ended up with 2 mentors from S Plan. One being Giuliano Buckner, who was a Q at the time. And then the other one being Farouk, where Farouk he just like how I carry myself. He said, all right, I'm going to mentor you too. That's your S-Plan mentor. And it just went from that. Like, I ain't going to lie. Like, I still talk to Farouk to this day. And if I see Giuliano, like, we still, kick it like, like we still in college. So the next question is, what do you say are, I guess, a bad mentor-mentee relationship would have? Like, what traits what those relationships have.
Probably like not no real communication. I come to you like, say, James, if you my mentor, like I'm coming to you for advice, you just giving bad advice. Like you
Uh-huh.
not leading me, you not trying to lead me down the right path. Like if you already been in a situation, you like, oh well, yeah, man, you should go ahead and do this,
Right.
knowing like that got you in trouble.
Right.
Like you ain't trying to have me sidestep
Right.
that situation or that circumstance, so that way I can end up being better for it. Like it's just like, oh well, oh man, what up? You good? All right, cool.
Right.
All right, I'll get you next week. All right.
Yeah.
Like it ain't no bond pretty much. It's like you almost treating like it's just work. Like, hey, I gotta meet up with you half an hour a day.
Right.
Oh, what you want to talk about?
Right.
Like, it don't feel genuine to me.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the lack of communication and not building that actual like genuine bond. Because without that genuine bond, you can't really open up and get to that deep level to where that real mentoring actually come into. And also with that, like a purpose of a mentor isn't to, oh, I had to learn the hard way, so you gonna learn the hard way
Right.
too. It's more so, I've been there, done that. Let me help you avoid making the same mistakes that I made. So that should be the goal of the mentor to the mentee. So I definitely agree with everything Reggie just said.
Well, I'll jump in. I'll jump in. So I'll say boundaries. So I think with any mentor-mentee relationship, you need to have boundaries on like what's gonna happen and like goals that you should be working towards. So I think like if you don't have any of that, then it's not gonna be a good mix. Like I just always encourage. I think what some of y'all say, these are the things that you don't want to happen. Like if you see these things are happening, it's bad.
Yeah.
And so I think they just kind of translate like, what good things, what good traits, are in a good mentee relationship. And I think both of the questions kind of intertwine, like for sure. But what things for sure, if you see it, you like, all right, that's a great relationship.
I mean, it's almost like just like a family, like either like a brother, sister, like father son type of relationship where it'd be like,
I
okay,
agree.
like I'm coming to you, like it's almost like I give you an example, like so one of my work mentors, like who, like I've seen like kind of grow through the company, where he started off as like my boss. I mean, almost every time I see him, like it's genuine love. Like
Right.
I mean, like even like as I'm trying to progress through the company target that I'm working at right now, like I mean, he didn't hit me up. Like he didn't be like, how's everything going? Like man, like if I'm not doing something right,
Right.
like he'll, if it calls for him to correct me in a moment in front of others, like he'll do it. But usually for the most part, like anytime,
He'll pull you
like,
to the
like,
side.
it's always something done to the side. Like if he see I'm having a bad day, he always, pull me in the room, let me get whatever I'm in, like whatever is on my chest, off my chest. Then he gives me advice on the situation. Like I always ask him for the advice, and he always gives me good advice. Like it's legit love. Like it's like you like I don't even know how else to like even like say it.
Right.
Like,
No, I get it. I
like,
get it. I get it 100%. I remember way back when. I had a mentee tell me this. I think it was powerful because it came from the mentee.
Yeah.
And she said, she was like, you're not being a good mentor if you're not being that big brother, big sister, to the mentee. And then when I take that and I be like, that's how I feel like my relationships work. Where like, in some cases, I think now as I'm getting older, you do become that father figure, to kids. For anybody like say, that's close to a peer or something like that, just treating them like they a younger brother or sister.
Yeah.
Like I feel like that's like huge. Where like you said, it's that family component. Where like now, like some of those mentors that I had, we like family, and it's just like we could literally pick back up. Like there's no interruption on like like I could see him like and me and Fruit were just talking. He said like man, it's all love. Like we see each other, we gonna pick right back up where we left off. Like with no interruption. You got anything to add?
Yes.
Yeah.
I know one thing I wanted to throw out there is a good mentor is not going to keep putting you off to the next person. Like you're not going to come to them with a question and the next thing they know be like, I don't know the answer, but you go ask this person. Like instead they'll take that initiative to go find the answer they don't know and then come back to you with the answer. Going back to what you said with building those boundaries, but also not crossing those boundaries.
Yeah.
So like having those boundaries, but also holding to those boundaries
Right.
will be a good indication of a good mentor. Also, just having that open communication. So it's like you can come to me about anything and be comfortable, but I'm not going to listen and go tell type thing. Just that confidentiality part there, and knowing that you have my greater good in mind. Is that how you say that?
Yeah.
And then another thing is, I would say a mentor would have to be cautious of not being a crutch to the mentee.
I agree.
I always want to like help them out of situations and things, because some things it does take worth having to learn through experience. Or you also don't want to be that person like always bailing them out when they keep making the same mistake over and over and over. At some point, they're gonna have to learn, but you can help guide them down that learning path.
That's real. I just did this presentation like a couple hours ago where we talked about mentorship, and I was just kind of telling the students on how, like, you know, yes, you want to set boundaries, but stick to those boundaries, you know, because, you know, I've been in situations where I've had to push mentees away, and it wasn't because like I was doing anything wrong, but it was just like the mentee had pretty much boundaries was crossed, and you had to like reestablish what was going on. But also, this particular mentee was just, you know, lying all the time, not being truthworthy with, like, you know, it's certain stuff like, you know, I like the goal set with mentees, and so, you know, I want to know what grade you get in, and anybody who knows if he was in S plan, you know, your mentor knew what grade you was getting, like, you know, and so, you know, and it was funny because I knew like his teachers' assistants, you know, and stuff, and it was like, he's like, oh yeah, I'm in class, but wasn't going to class, but, you know, trying to pull up to my crib and stuff, and it's like, the two things ain't gonna work, because at first my roommates wanted that, like, and I explained this one, I said my roommates wanted it because they was like, you know, we all gonna do that, because you could definitely see this particular mentee was struggling with some daddy issues. And so my roommates, they wanted in on this too. They was like, you know, we gonna help. But then it just became a point where it was like, nah, bro, you know, he not learning, and it's not on you, because I got, you know, other mentees where it's like complete different story. It's just that he didn't want to own up, like, you know, to what he was doing. And so I actually had to kind of push him away. So like, hey, until you figure out, you know, what you doing, you know, we need to, you know, take some time. And it was funny, you know, like where fast forward a year later, you know, he was reaching out to me like, hey, you know, this was going on. I know I messed up. Yeah, you did. Like, Moss was really, you know, trying to help you. And not saying, you know, you took advantage of a situation, but also I had to go through that because I'm like, damn, I'm a bad mentor. Like, I was going through it. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's like with anything. Like, I mean, like where I work at, like I am slash was like I'm an in between trainer with everything that's going on with me as far as developing. But like it's like that first one always is the like I tell people like if you good at what you do, like your first failure, like it always sticks with you. Like that's the one you always remember because it's like you want to see everybody be successful.
Right.
And I mean it's even like to that point, I mean like that's an example still of a good mentor. Like you was like, okay, like I see you not taking you know, you taking advantage of the situation. Like you're not actually trying to get nothing out of it, you know, like at that point, like that's what you're supposed to do. Like it's supposed to be like, okay, like hey, like I have a saying now. Like I tell everybody, like, look, I can lead you to the water. I can't make you drink it. Like, so look, hey, I'm a take you there, but like what you decide to do with it, like that's true. That's on you.
That's true.
Like, and if you like, don't nobody want to keep wasting their time. Like, and I think that's ultimately what it is. And it's like, you know, if a person can't see or understand that, like sometimes like you do, like you got to remove yourself, and then that I always say usually sometimes like a person's always gonna have that victim mentality first, like oh man, like you know he just the same, blah blah blah, like you know everybody do this, but then it's like okay, like oh you know when you actually start to self-assess, self-reflect about the situations, you know you just talk to somebody else about the situation, and then they give you a different perspective. Like next thing you know, you be like, all right, you know what, dang, maybe like he said, like yeah, you know I was wrong, like you know I wasn't mentally there to be trying to do this.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that, and you know shout out to the OGs, you know OGs, and I say like you know Mr. Smith and them, you know who definitely was supportive and said like James, you know like we know you. You did all you could. Like you couldn't have did anything more. And I think, you know, when you hear it from like, like say the people who you looking up to, like say, you like, all right, okay, cool, I don't want to say I'm a perfectionist, like I said, but you do take stuff
to heart.
You take stuff to heart. So I guess the next question or questions, we could combine them. If you remember, maybe who was your favorite mentors and or favorite mentees and why?
I would say my favorite mentors are two older ladies. One, I feel like I said ladies because I feel like iron sharpens iron. So it's just one of those. I had another woman to look up to go down the path.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're on the path where I want to be. So it's like, all right, cool. But I think, and I'm gonna get to their names in a little bit. But I think one thing that was real golden about it was situations where I didn't realize that mentoring was actually happening in it until after the fact is what makes it so precious to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I would definitely say Miss Curry's one of them. Because it was just one of them, like, was one of them people always like, all right, I'm taking you under my wing, and I ain't letting you go.
She definitely did.
You definitely just gonna be here with me
Had
until
you on
I
e-board
say.
as a sophomore,
Yeah,
I remember.
Yeah. And the crazy part is, like, I don't even, like, Miss Curry was one of them people I always had a hand on who was in her class. Like, she pretty much kind of tried to handpick them.
Thanks.
And I kind of snuck into her class. What was that class? It was
UNIV 101?
Yes, UNIV 101. And so I was just like signing up for classes. I think she was out of the office, and I was like, Center for Black Studies. Yes, I want that one. And then so they had to like try to find codes and everything in order to get me in, and she wasn't in office. But they eventually made it happen. So, and I waited for hours just to get that class added onto my schedule. And then I got there. She was just talking to me like she knew me, and I'm like, I never seen you a day in my life, but hey.
Thanks.
And from there it just grew. Like to this day, she's like a grandmother to me. And the other lady is back from when I was young. I had to be like 8 or 9 years old. And this is her name is Chris Lott, first lady at my church. And she was just one of those who also just took me under her wings and just poured into me everything that she knew, and like whatever she was pretty much getting into, she was like, hey Jazz, you gotta know about this. Hey Jazz, come to this with me. Come here with me. And then she also just took me out to eat just to have those one-on-one conversations to make sure that, that line of communication stayed open. Even when I was in college and I tried to run away because I knew I wasn't doing what I needed to do, she still kept calling, leaving voicemails and everything, prayed for me. So, and that's another thing, like me being a Christian woman, finding those women that that's going to pray for you too, is just another thing that I found very precious as well.
Okay.
It's gonna be tough to limit it to a couple.
I'm already knowing.
So I'm gonna do just who's been definitely having the biggest impact on my life currently. So one of them, like I said, was an ex-boss of mine. His name was Darren, and unfortunately I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Just because he always showed, like when I first met him, like when he first became my boss, like almost 4 or 5 years ago. Like, he showed that respect. Like, it was just like, down working in a trailer. He's like, hey, man, like, I like how you working it. Like, I see you ain't get frustrated or nothing, like, in the situation that you was put in. It's like, you came in, you tackled it head on. It's, how do we get people to be like, he saw something to me that I didn't see in myself.
Right.
Yeah.
And like I said, in ever since, like, he's always been somebody, like, who's always tried to strive me to push for more. Like, never, like, I'm not somebody who gets complacent, but he saw something in me, like, from a leadership standpoint that, like, I never envisioned myself ever having or doing. The other person, his name is Thomas Williams, somebody who I currently work with now. And he been a huge mentor as far as, like, just my change in attitude, my change in mindset, my change in, my spirituality. Like, he was the one, like, who started to open up my eyes. It's like, okay, like, it's not all about work. Like, you gotta have, that balance.
Right.
Like, you gotta be able to, spend the time with the family. Like, you gotta make sure that you're taking care of yourself spiritually, mentally, physically. Like, it's cool, try to take care of yourself financially, but, like, he always told me when he was first, talking to me, when you die, that money don't go nowhere. Like, like, look, like, you can't take none of this stuff with you. So it's like, he made me appreciate everything else. And then, like I said, like as I was starting to open up myself mentally, like spiritually and stuff, like you start to see stuff completely different. Like and he's somebody like anytime necessarily like if I'm in a bad mood or like I seem out of it, like he always is one
notice it.
To notice it, reach out, just to make sure that I'm okay. And then like even like now, he knows when certain stuff happens, like he's like, oh, like I know ain't nothing really wrong with him. He good. It's just that man is in a deep mental thought about what's going on and is what he's doing, really important. To me, like those was two that was huge. I mean, I could throw others like Don Bramlett, who was the
Don father.
Head of BMI. I mean, like he was one when I was being a knucklehead in school. Like, I mean, he was one who was always reaching out. Like I said, reached out to my mom, like my grandma.
Right.
Before, I mean, it's it's a ton. Like my ship. I mean, he don't know. Like I look to him as a mentor, but I'm like he was somebody who I always. Because he always had his head on straight. Like, I mean, ended up being president of NPAC, I think 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
President of the fraternity. Like, it was like, so, he was somebody who I always just, looked to, like, as, like, oh, yeah, like, we the same age, like, but because I see what you doing, like, it's like, okay, like, that make you want to step your game up even more.
Right.
So I got friends who, to me, like I consider a lot of people mentors, whether they really understand
it or not.
That's what they are, not. But just because like you can pick up that information from a ton of people. Like like somebody told me at work, like it's like you determine what a mentor is gonna do for you. Like at the end of the day, like you like you said, you set that boundary about as far as like what they gonna do. And like to me, like I'm like I mean even Jasmine, like I consider a mentor. Like I consider Jasmine, like even you, James, like I consider you one. Like it's just like just because like when we having those conversations, like if I can pick up something from you, like to me, like you mentoring me, like that's like you guiding me through life.
I think that's good, and I think with everybody, we all should be able to take stuff from people, and I always tell people so I definitely know Don, and I rock with Don. Like I call him the Don father because Don always made stuff happen, and I remember, so everybody know I had a hump that I had to get over with school, and then once I got over that hump, I just knew like. Graduation was gonna come, but I would just say stuff like, "Man, I'm dropping out," and Don be like, "No, you're not. I'm gonna kick your butt, James. You ain't dropping out. We done worked too hard." I'm like, "All right, Don, but I think some mentors for me, like I said, definitely Don, Mr. Smith, Kielo, Officer Shaw, Pastor Wright, Lil Brian. Like, I think I was just able to just take some from them, and they saw even my hard record for freshman Martise. I learned a lot from him, but I think because they saw me. Because like when Martise told me, I saw him like a couple years ago, he wanted me to go into higher ed and work. Like when he saw me as a freshman, like he said he knew I would be a good person. And so he loved seeing me like doing that work. Yeah. And then when I talked to like some of them other people, they was like, we knew you was going to end up here. I'm like, how y'all know I was going to end up here? I'm like, I didn't know I was going to do it. I was just going through the motions of just, taking y'all's advice with stuff and just, moving forward. And this is just kind of where I landed because I ended up, enjoying the work. Like, say, and Dr. Wyatt. Got to shout out Dr. Wyatt because that was my high school mentor. And he done gave me some opportunities, even as a professional, where I just get this access, a group of kids to mentor, to opportunities that I would not have had. If he went there, he'd be looking at, like, what are you trying to do? And I told him, like, Doc, I want to write an article. He's like, let's do it, because I want to get myself published. That's like a big thing in higher ed, like people being published. And I'm like, Doc, I want to be published. And he's like, let's make it happen. So, just grateful to have like, people from all different spectrums and backgrounds, where, you can learn and you can create your own identity within it. Just grateful, like I said, because I feel like, I'm like a sponge and, I could probably list another 10 more people, that I consider, mentors and so, but I think like some of them, although they was the professionals, I think they definitely was mentors, but also had peers that was mentors. Like what you mentioned, like, your ship. I had Farouk, who I mentioned earlier, and Delonte, and just grateful, like I said, because I can see Delonte, now, like, and, he going to want to pull up the shots. Like, that's just being real. Like, and it's just because once you get to, certain phases, like say y'all become, family. Like,
Yeah.
I can reach out to them and they can respond. And so, and I'm newly in my field. Like I've been in my field like 4 years, so that's still fairly new. And so like I'm definitely looking for guidance on how to navigate things because I'm going to some of these places where I am the only, like at my last school, I was the only black male in our student affairs department. So it was a lot of identity struggling where I was looking for a mentor, but I couldn't find one on campus.
Yeah.
But indirectly had to utilize a network and say like, well, we're not at the same campus, but you're in Chicago, so you know what I'm, what I'm going through, and that worked with me, as far as like finding what I needed as a professional.
And Jack, you said something real key. As far as you in your mentee role, you're a sponge. So like you're willing to learn. You're looking to soak up things, and I think that's another key thing that makes like a good mentee. One that's like always willing to learn and not like bullheaded. And not like you can't tell me what to do, and who are you to tell me like type deals.
That's the one thing Farouk always tell me. He said, "Man, you listen because people knew I was a political science major in undergrad. So at one point I wanted to go into politics. So I lived for like the campus elections, and I tell people to this day, every election I ever ran, I won, like regardless of what it was. And some of it was like say I took the advice Farouk gave me, and I think it was only one election people didn't think I was gonna win, but I ended up winning it, and people was like, "How?" But it, said, but one, I listened, but two, I listened to what Farouk said, but two, I had friends in a lot of places. Whereas we could talk about being black at NIU, that wasn't the scope of like my involvement.
Yeah.
And so where I was in other avenues, and what other people was like, "Hey, it's James, we're gonna vote for him," and my odds went out. And so I think that one election where I should have lost because I ran against the incumbent treasurer for the Black Student Union. That person was Greek, I was not. And I still made it happen, and people was some people were shocked, like who is that, but that kind of pride, like say me and Fruit talk about, like I ain't lose no elections that I actually ran, like from freshman year to the time I graduated.
Yeah, I mean, but even like we can even throw that even with everything that's going on today. Like it's like like people don't understand. Like like it's always good to support, but it's like you also got to be able to go out and have different avenues of support other than just your own. And I think like that's a lot of stuff that we like. I mean, like even like now, like I mean, looking at the people who protesting. I mean, like it's people protesting China, London,
right,
France,
right.
Like I mean, you talk to all of these people, like, and when you go look at them pictures, like I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that they got some, they got some black people over there, probably a couple,
right.
But when you looking at them. When you looking at them pictures, that's those people from that actual country being out there protesting. So like you gotta be able to broaden your horizons, I guess I'll say. Like I mean, like one of the people like who I did look up to, like Malcolm X. Like I mean, he's like his biggest change in life was when he went on his
sabbatical,
to Mecca. Where he was like, okay, like, man, like, okay, I see, like, it ain't always just about us sticking together. Like, there's, like, I always tell people, like, there's people of your own, like, who don't care nothing about, who just out to destroy. And then, like, there's people of other, ethnicities, like, who we keep sitting up here saying is the enemy, like, who really ain't an enemy. Like, they actually truly an ally. Like, but you have to know and have to be able to distinguish the difference, like, at the end of the day.
All right, that was good. And I think just to wrap it up, with as far as Jasmine touched on a little bit about what a good mentee is, and I like that what you said, you're just a sponge. But I think also too, the one thing I think me and Farouk like kind of agreed on, and I think Miss Curry even liked it, where like I was able to own up to my mistakes, like I'm not perfect, but I owned up to my mistakes, where when I was on academic probation, it was like, hey, I ain't gonna lie, I messed up, like, and to say, okay, what are we going to do to correct this? Because yes, you got to do the work, but that mentor is there to support you and, give you that guidance. And so I think, like, for me, that was like the good traits, like, I had as a mentee, being a sponge and just being able to admit when I was wrong and trying to work to correct it.
Yeah, I mean, self-reflection is just key with anything. I mean,
True.
anything that you do, you're going to need to be able to self-reflect. Like, I always tell people, like, you get two roles in life. You can be a victim or you can be a victor. A victim is going to blame everybody else. A victor is going to figure out how to overcome whatever happened. Like, and not to sit there and say that you probably have a fair gripe, being like, okay, like, yeah, well, I mean, this did happen. Like, some stuff, like, ain't really in your control, but it's like, okay, like, I tell people, like, now, I do, so what, now what? Like, that's what I tell people, so what that this thing happened, now what you gonna do about it? Like, you can sit here and cry about it, or, you can pick yourself up, dust yourself off, figure out how to attack whatever the situation is. Especially, like, with people who I do give advice to, because I wouldn't 100% call myself a mentor because I'm still trying to learn stuff to this day.
Right.
But I'm like, that's the one thing I always tell them. It's like, you always get two choices. Like, you get two options. You can give up or you can get back up and fight. Like, only you determine who's going to make that choice. Nobody else can make that choice but you. So.
And you can still be a mentor while still learning. So don't sell yourself short. Because, you're always still learning.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, like, it's just like I tell people, like, I consider myself, like, how I tell people is I'm just giving you my experiences. Like, so, like, I tell people, like, anybody who you'll go find who knows me, who I've, like, kind of mentored or, given advice to, like, almost everybody will tell you, like, oh, man, like, it's like my big bro. Like, that's, man, that's like my work dad or whatever, yada yada. Like, oh man, like, I had a person come up to me. He was like, "Yeah, man, I look at you like my Obama." And I was like, like, dang, like, cause like, you never know though, like, cause like, you never know, like, who you really impacted. And I mean, that was somebody, like, who I've given advice just along the way, like, just had, like, little conversations here and there. But he was like, man, like, like, the impact that you didn't have, like, it's not even so much about what you said, it's just about how you move. Like, it's about what you do. Like, you always came in with a good attitude. Like, you always, like, you built good relationships with your, not only your peers, but with management as well. Like, people actually come, like, when they first come into the name, like, when they first come into the building, like, the first name that always get thrown out is your name. Like, that's like where I want to get to. And he told me, he was like, it's so much so, like, I even involved, like, I'm starting to involve myself even more within the company now. Like, I'm trying to actually build those relationships. Like, I told him, like, I'm like, good, like, cause, like, we need more people of color, to be trying to do this. Like, like, and that's the one thing, like, I know, at least for me, that's big on me, is, like, impact and legacy. Like, it's like, and that's at least letting me know, like, what I'm doing is, I guess, the right thing.
I agree. I agree with that. I think, it's important. So I think we talked about two things, just to kind of, like, wrap it up, where mentorship is definitely important on the college level, but also important on the professional level, where you're going to need those mentors. And if you had experience in college, I think it'd be able to help you easily identify people or to know what to look for, versus, but we all need it at, any point in our life, especially, when you, the new guy on a job or you're trying to progress up, you need to find mentors that are in those roles and positions that you want to be in. So I just want to thank Jasmine and Reggie, for popping up on the podcast. I kind of just threw it on them, but I like the dialogue we had. I like the perspectives, and as they say, we all learn from each other. I learned a lot. I hope y'all learned a lot. I'll catch y'all the next time on the 79th Street Podcast.